The nurse didn't hesitate. She didn't shout. She didn't warn him. She punched the Navy Admiral square in the face, hard enough to drop him, right there in a hospital hallway full of families, doctors, and security cameras. Within seconds, alarms screamed, Marines rushed in, nurses froze. And the man who'd been smiling, hand extended for a friendly handshake, went completely pale. Because that punch didn't just break protocol. It stopped a murder that was 8 seconds away from being completed. And the reason why will leave you stunned. But to understand how one punch saved a life, exposed a killer, and changed American hospital security forever, we need to rewind. 8 hours earlier. 8 hours before the punch. 8 hours before the poison. 8 hours before a man almost died without ever touching his newborn child. Rear Admiral Thomas Walker had spent most of his adult life missing moments that mattered. Birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, funerals. 26 years in the U.S. Navy had taught him discipline, sacrifice, and how to stay calm under fire, but it hadn't taught him how to be present. Tonight was supposed to be different. He stood inside a secure briefing room at Naval Station Norfolk, listening to officers discuss upcoming deployments, but his mind wasn't there. His phone sat silent in his pocket, and every few seconds his fingers twitched toward it. Then it vibrated. Thomas froze. He pulled it out slowly, as if sudden movement might jinx whatever miracle was unfolding. A voicemail notification from Emily, his wife. His heart hammered as he pressed play. Tom, the doctor says it's time. I'm in labor. Please, I need you here. Please don't miss this. His breath caught. For a man who had commanded fleets and stared down enemy fire, nothing had ever shaken him like those words. Thomas stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Conversations stopped. Every officer turned toward him. Gentlemen, he said, voice unsteady, my wife is having our baby. I'm leaving. No permission. No formal dismissal. He walked out. 26 years of choosing duty over family, and tonight, for the first time, he chose differently. If you believe family should always come first, make sure you're subscribed, because what this man almost loses tonight will hit you hard. The drive to the hospital felt longer than any mission briefing ever had. Emily was 41, Thomas was 52. They had waited 9 years for this moment. 9 years of failed treatments. 3 miscarriages. More nights crying in silence than Thomas wanted to admit. When the pregnancy test finally came back positive 6 months earlier, Thomas had promised her something he'd never promised before. I will be there, he'd said. No matter what. And for once, he meant it. He stopped at a nearly closed flower shop, buying every pink and white rose they had. The cashier smiled knowingly. First baby, she asked. Yes, observed, Thomas's voice cracked, and probably my last. He whispered the name they'd chosen while driving. Grace Elizabeth Walker. Grace, because that's what this felt like. At Mercy Shore Medical Center, the night shift had settled into its usual rhythm. Calm, controlled, routine. Or so it seemed. On the 5th floor, Dr. Victor Hale, the hospital's respected CEO, stood alone in his office, staring at his reflection. He applied a clear, odorless gel carefully across his right palm. Invisible. Undetectable. Lethal. Victor Hale didn't see himself as a villain. He saw himself as a man correcting history. 8 years earlier, a Navy operation led by Admiral Walker had destroyed Victor's family. His brother had gone to prison. His mother had never recovered. Everything Victor loved collapsed, and Walker never even learned his name. Tonight, Victor planned to return the favor. One handshake. One smile. One death that would look like a tragic medical mystery. His phone buzzed. Walker just entered the parking lot. Victor slipped the phone away and smiled. Down on the fourth floor, Nurse Ava Collins adjusted an IV line for an elderly patient, her movements gentle, precise. "You always know when something's wrong," the woman murmured. Ava smiled politely. She didn't tell people about her past. She didn't tell them she once worked for a classified federal unit specializing in chemical threat detection. She didn't tell them her sense of smell could identify toxins at microscopic levels. She especially didn't tell them why she'd quit. Tonight she was just a nurse in the maternity wing, her favorite place, life beginning instead of ending. But as she stepped into the hallway, something shifted. A metallic note in the air. Faint wrong. Her body reacted before her mind did. Heart rate up. Breathing shallow. Instinct screaming. Ava stopped. Down the hall, two men were approaching each other. One carried flowers and hope. The other carried death on his skin. And Ava realized with absolute certainty that in seconds a handshake would kill a man. She had no time to explain. Only time to act. Ava Collins didn't panic. Panic wasted time, and time was something she didn't have. Her senses narrowed, tuning out everything except the faint chemical signature drifting through the hallway. Most people would never notice it, not in a hospital full of disinfectant, latex, and recycled air. But Ava wasn't most people. The smell hit the back of her throat like cold metal mixed with oil, synthetic, contact-based, fast-acting. Her training surfaced instantly. 8 seconds to bloodstream absorption. Less than a minute to cardiac failure. She tracked the source without moving her head. The man with the clipboard. Hospital CEO. Calm posture. Right hand exposed. Poison. Her stomach dropped. At the far end of the corridor, Rear Admiral Thomas Walker rounded the corner, roses in hand, smiling like a man whose entire life was finally coming together. He was 3 steps from death and didn't know it. Ava's mind raced through options. Shout too slow. Warn security too far. Pull the CEO back, he'd already reached out. The Admiral lifted his hand. Reflexively. The way men trained to trust protocol always did. No time, no warning, no choice. Ava ran. Her shoes slapped against the polished floor as the distance vanished in seconds. Staff turned, startled by the sudden sprint. A few voices shouted her name, but they blurred into noise. 10 feet. 5. The CEO's smile widened. "Admiral Walker, congratulations," he said warmly, extending his poisoned hand. Thomas felt a rush of gratitude. Even strangers seemed to share his joy tonight. He reached out. And the world exploded. Ava's fist connected with Thomas Walker's jaw with a sharp, sickening crack. The impact echoed down the hallway. The Admiral spun sideways, crashing into the wall. The bouquet flew from his hands, petals scattering across the floor like spilled blood. "Contamination," Ava screamed. "Do not touch him." For half a second, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Security alarms blared, Marines surged forward, nurses gasped, someone screamed. The CEO's face transformed, shock snapping instantly into terror. He tried to step back. Too late. A Marine seized his arm. "Don't move, sir." The CEO struggled. "This is insane." She assaulted a flag officer. Ava hit the floor hard as security tackled her from behind, forcing her arms into restraints. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't stop shouting. "Test his hand. Right palm. Contact poison, lethal." Thomas sat dazed against the wall, jaw throbbing, struggling to process what had just happened. A nurse. A punch. Poison. What the hell is going on? He demanded. A hazmat alert blared overhead. Within minutes, the hallway transformed. Yellow tape. Protective suits. Portable testing kits wheeled in at speed. The CEO's confident posture collapsed as technicians swabbed his palm. His breathing quickened, his eyes darted. Ava lay handcuffed on the floor, chest heaving, watching every movement with desperate focus. If she was wrong, her career was over. If she was right, a man would live. Preliminary results in 10 seconds, a technician announced. 10 seconds stretched into eternity. Thomas looked at Ava, the nurse who'd punched him without hesitation. Her eyes weren't wild, they were terrified and certain. "Ma'am," a security officer muttered, "you'd better be right." The test strip changed color. The technician froze. "Oh my God." Every sound in the hallway died. "Positive," the technician said, voice tight. "Highly toxic synthetic compound, absorption-based, fatal on contact." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The CEO went pale. "No," he whispered, "that's impossible." Marines tightened their grip. Thomas's heart slammed into his ribs as reality crashed down. That handshake would have killed him. Ava exhaled shakily as tears streamed down her face, not from fear but relief. She'd been right. Police arrived minutes later, then federal agents. The CEO broke. 8 years of planning spilled out in a single confession, fueled by rage and collapse. "You destroyed my family," he screamed at Thomas as agents dragged him away. "You didn't even remember." Thomas stood frozen. He remembered now. And the cost of almost forgetting had nearly been his life. 3 hours later, Ava sat alone in the break room, scrubs torn, hands trembling around a cold cup of coffee. She stared at her knuckles. "I punched a Navy Admiral," she whispered to herself. The door opened. Thomas Walker stepped inside, jaw bruised, eyes steady. He didn't look angry. He looked grateful. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Ava swallowed hard. "I had no time." Thomas nodded. "Because of you, I get to meet my daughter." He showed her a photo on his phone. A newborn. Perfect. Alive. "This is Grace," he said. Ava covered her mouth as tears fell freely. She hadn't just stopped a murder. She'd protected a future. And neither of them yet realized how far the consequences of that punch were about to reach. The hospital never truly slept that night. Long after the hallway had been cleared and the alarms silenced, Mercy Shore Medical Center pulsed with quiet urgency. Federal agents moved in unmarked jackets, doors were locked, offices sealed, computers unplugged and tagged. What had started as a violent outburst in a maternity hallway had become something much darker. Ava Collins sat in a small conference room, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, her scrubs replaced with stiff hospital-issued clothes. A detective across the table clicked a recorder on. "For the record," he said gently, "state your full name and your background." Ava took a breath. "My name is Ava Collins. Before I became a nurse, I worked for a federal chemical threat response unit. I have advanced olfactory detection." The detective blinked. "You can smell poison." "Yes," she said, "down to trace levels." Another agent leaned forward. "And you recognized the compound tonight?" Ava nodded. "Synthetic organophosphate variant, designed for skin absorption, lethal within seconds." Silence filled the room. "That substance," the agent said slowly, "is not something a civilian should have access to." Ava's stomach tightened. Then he wasn't just angry. "No," the agent replied, "he was prepared." 5 floors above them, Victor Hale's office was being dismantled piece by piece. A locked drawer revealed a leather-bound journal. 8 years of entries. Dates. Surveillance notes. Sketches of hospital corridors. One page was underlined 3 times. He will die thinking about the child he will never meet. An FBI agent exhaled sharply, Jesus. Behind a false wall panel, they found lab equipment. Beakers. Protective gloves. Chemical synthesis, instructions printed from encrypted forums. He made the poison here, an agent muttered, inside a hospital. Worse still, another cabinet. 3 folders. 3 names. 2 more military officers. 1 federal prosecutor. Incomplete plans, alternate methods. This wasn't a one-time thing, the lead agent said grimly. Walker was just first. Rear Admiral Thomas Walker learned this sitting in a Stark Command trailer parked outside the hospital. His wife, Emily, lay upstairs recovering from an emergency C-section. Their daughter slept beside her, unaware how close she'd come to never knowing her father. An FBI supervisor spoke carefully. Sir, if Nurse Collins hadn't acted, this individual would have continued, possibly for years. Thomas closed his eyes. Years of service. Enemies abroad. And the real threat had waited for him in a hospital hallway. He thought of Ava, handcuffed, bruised, terrified, but unhesitating. She hadn't just saved him. She stopped a serial killer. At 4:17 a.m., Ava was finally released from questioning. No charges. No reprimand. But uncertainty lingered like smoke. A security chief walked her to the exit. Off the record, you changed everything tonight. Ava managed a tired smile. I just paid attention. Outside, cold air hit her face. She walked away from her past to escape death. And death had followed her anyway. 3 days later, the story exploded. Headlines dominated every screen. Nurse stops assassination attempt in hospital. CEO arrested in poison plot against Navy Admiral. Media vans clogged the street, pundits argued, social media exploded. Hero. Maniac. Whistleblower. Ava avoided it all. Until the call came. The hospital boardroom was filled when Ava walked in. Executives. Lawyers. Public relations consultants. At the head of the table sat a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Ava Collins, the chairwoman began, you assaulted a military officer on hospital property. Ava's chest tightened. And the woman continued, you prevented first-degree murder, exposed catastrophic security failures, and likely saved multiple lives. The room was silent. We are creating a new position, the chairwoman said, Director of Safety and Threat Assessment. Ava stared, you're offering me a job. A mandate, the woman corrected. You will redesign how this hospital identifies and stops threats. Another board member added, this position is funded in part by Admiral Walker. Ava's breath caught. He insisted, the chairwoman said, rather forcefully. What Ava didn't know was that Thomas Walker had spent the past 48 hours on secure calls with Pentagon officials and healthcare regulators. We protect buildings, he told them, but we ignore chemical threats in places of healing. That nurse saw what everyone else missed. When a general questioned the cost, Thomas responded calmly. She punched me to save my life, fund the program. By the end of the call, a $500,000 grant had been approved. The Collins Protocol was born. 6 months later, the hospital looked different. Discrete chemical sensors lined hallways. Staff underwent threat awareness training. Security protocols changed nationwide. 3 attempted attacks were stopped quietly. No headlines. No funerals. And at home, Thomas rocked his daughter to sleep, present in a way he never had been before. Grace gripped his finger tightly. Ava visited often. They weren't hero and survivor anymore. They were family. Success didn't bring peace. It brought attention. 6 months after the night that changed everything, Ava Collins stood alone in the hospital command room at 2:17 a.m., staring at a wall of monitors glowing softly in the dark. Mercy Shore Medical Center was quieter now, safer, but Ava knew better than anyone that danger didn't disappear. It adapted. The Collins Protocol, as the media had started calling it, was being copied by hospitals across the country. Administrators praised it. Senators quoted it. News anchors called Ava a hero. But heroes didn't sleep well. Every alarm spike made her pulse jump. Every unusual pattern tightened her chest. Because she'd learned a brutal truth in her former life: once you stop a threat, others take notice. And not all of them were grateful. The alert chimed softly. Amber level. Ava straightened instantly. Monitor 14, East Entrance. A man packing just outside the sliding doors, no medical reason for being there, hands in pockets, eyes scanning. Security, Ava said into her headset, calm but firm. I want eyes on subject at East Entrance, male, mid-30s, grey jacket. Copy, came the reply. She zoomed in. Something was off. Not aggressive, not panicked. Focused. She felt the familiar tingle at the base of her skull. Instinct. Across town, Rear Admiral Thomas Walker sat in his kitchen, bottle-feeding Grace, while Emily slept upstairs. Retirement had come earlier than expected. After everything, he'd chosen family over another promotion. Grace wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. You don't know how close I came to missing you, he whispered. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Walker. A pause. Then a voice, low and deliberate. She made you a hero. Thomas stiffened. Who is this? She ruined everything for a lot of people, the voice continued, and now she thinks she's untouchable. The line went dead. Thomas stared at the phone. And fear, real fear, crept in. Back at Mercy Shore, the man at the entrance finally moved. Security approached him cautiously. Ava leaned forward, heart pounding. The man bolted. Red alert, Ava shouted. Lock down East Wing now. Doors sealed, sirens blared, patients ushered into rooms. The man slipped, crashed into a cart, and something metallic clattered across the floor. A canister. Not poison. Worse. Tear gas, modified. Security tackled him seconds later. Ava exhaled sharply. Close. Too close. Interrogation revealed the truth. The man wasn't acting alone. He was part of an online extremist group that believed hospitals should remain neutral spaces. No screening, no intervention. Ava's protocols threatened their ideology. She turned hospitals into fortresses, he sneered. Someone had to scare her. The message was clear. They were watching. The next morning, Ava sat in her office staring at the city skyline, hands trembling slightly. She'd known this was coming. She just hadn't known how soon. Thomas arrived without warning. You're in danger, he said bluntly. So are you, Ava replied. They sat in silence. Finally, Thomas spoke. You didn't just stop one man, you exposed a blind spot. People don't like that. Ava nodded. I can't stop now. I know, Thomas said quietly. That's why I'm here. He slid a folder across the desk. Pentagon letterhead. National expansion. Funding. Protection. Authority. They want you to lead this, Thomas said, nationwide. Ava's breath caught. This makes me a bigger target. It also makes you harder to silence. She looked at the folder, then thought of the hallway. The punchy. The 8 seconds. I'm in, she said. 3 weeks later, Ava stood before a Senate subcommittee. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded close. Healthcare workers are the first line of defense, she testified. We notice what others miss, but only if we're trained and empowered to act. One senator leaned forward, even if it means breaking protocol. Ava met his gaze. Protocol exists to save lives, she said evenly. The moment it stops doing that, we must be brave enough to break it. The room went silent. Then applause. That night, Ava returned home to her apartment. New locks, added security, a Marine stationed discreetly downstairs. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, exhaustion finally settling in. Her phone buzzed. A text. You won once, you won't always be watching. Ava deleted it without responding. She learned something important. Fear thrived on hesitation. And she didn't hesitate anymore. Across the city, a figure closed a laptop and smiled thinly. Hospitals had changed. But so had the game. And the next move would be far more dangerous. The first alert came from Chicago. Ava Collins was midway through a briefing at the Department of Health when her tablet vibrated sharply against the podium. She didn't stop speaking, but her eyes flicked down for half a second. Collins Protocol, Red Alert. Chicago Veterans Medical Center. Her pulse spiked. Red alerts were rare, nationwide rare. She finished her sentence calmly, dismissed the room, and was already moving before the doors fully opened. By the time she reached a secure conference room, 3 more alerts had appeared. San Diego, Atlanta, St. Louis. 4 hospitals. 4 minutes. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordination. Screens lit up as regional feeds connected. Ava stood at the center of the room, headset on, voice steady but sharp. Report. Chicago's security chief spoke first. Unidentified male attempted to access neonatal wing. Badge spoofed. Detected by Collins' sensor grid. Detained. San Diego followed. Chemical residue detected at main entrance. Non-lethal but designed to trigger panic. Suspect fled. Atlanta, behavioral alert flagged a woman posing as staff, found carrying a blade. St. Louis, power fluctuation triggered lockdown. We believe it was a test. Ava closed her eyes briefly. They're probing, she said, learning our response times. This wasn't about casualties. It was about confidence. If they could make hospitals doubt the system, even once, everything Ava built would crumble. Rear Admiral Thomas Walker listened from a secure Pentagon line, jaw tight. Who's behind this? He asked. Ava didn't hesitate. The same people who sent the threats, but this time they're smarter. She turned to the room. They're not trying to hurt patients, they're trying to make us hesitate. And hesitation, Ava knew, was lethal. That night, Ava didn't go home. She sat in the command center, cross-referencing data streams, looking for patterns. 4 cities, different methods, same signature. Timing. Every attempt occurred during shift changes, moments of transition when trust replaced vigilance. Ava felt a chill. They're exploiting human nature, she murmured. Her screen flashed again. A message routed through encrypted channels. You can't watch every hallway. Sooner or later, someone will look away. Ava typed back only one word. No. The next move came faster than she expected. A children's hospital in Phoenix. No alerts. No warnings. Just a call. Ava, the hospital director said, voice shaking, we missed something. Her heart dropped. What happened? A man accessed the oncology wing using a stolen badge. No weapons, no chemicals. Then why are you calling? A pause. He spoke to staff, told them your system was failing, that they were being watched. Ava closed her eyes. Psychological warfare. Worse than poison. News coverage exploded within hours. Nationwide hospital alerts spark fear. Is the Collins protocol working? Pundits debated, administrators hesitated, one hospital quietly paused implementation. That was all it took. Ava watched the news in silence. Thomas stood beside her. They're winning the narrative. Not yet, Ava said softly. She stood. They want doubt, she continued, so we give them transparency. The next morning, Ava did something no one expected. She went live. National broadcast. No script. No filters. I won't promise you perfection, she said to millions watching. Safety isn't about guarantees, it's about response. She explained the alerts, the interceptions, the near misses. We stopped every physical threat, she said firmly, but the real danger is fear. Fear makes us freeze. Fear makes us stop trusting our instincts. She leaned forward. If you work in healthcare, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, act, even if you're afraid. The response was immediate. Support poured in. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, security staff. They shared stories. Moments they'd hesitated, and moments they wouldn't anymore. But the enemy wasn't finished. At 11:42 p.m., a hospital in Ohio went dark. Complete blackout. Emergency generators failed. Ava's heart slammed. Get me everything, she ordered. Technicians worked frantically. This isn't a cyber attack, one said. It's physical. Ava's blood ran cold. Where's the backup generator? A pause. Then offline. Someone had planned this. Without lights, without power. Without time. Ava grabbed her coat. I'm going there. Thomas caught her arm. Ava, this could be a trap. She met his eyes. It already is, she said, and if I don't walk into it, people will die. As her car sped through the night, Ava's phone buzzed one last time. Come see what happens when you're not there. She didn't respond. She drove faster. Because somewhere, in the dark, lives were counting on her to notice what others couldn't. The hospital in Ohio sat in complete darkness. Not the soft, emergency dimness hospitals were designed for, but a deep, unnatural black that swallowed sound and movement alike. Ava Collins stepped out of the car and felt it immediately. Silence. Too quiet. No generators humming. No emergency lights. No distant beeping of monitors. This wasn't a failure. It was deliberate. Ava clipped a flashlight to her jacket and moved fast, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Police cars crowded the entrance, officers shouting into radios, their beams cutting frantic white lines through the dark. Ava, a hospital administrator, rushed toward her. We don't know how, but everything went offline. Backups, redundancies gone. Ava didn't slow. How many patients? Over 200. ICU, NICU, surgical recovery. She was already inside. The smell hit her first. Not chemicals. Fear. It clung to the air, sweat, panic, adrenaline. Nurses moved through hallways with flashlights taped to IV poles. Doctors shouted instructions by memory and instinct alone. Ava grabbed a radio. All staff, listen carefully. You know your patients. Stay with them. Trust your training. Do not wait for permission. Her voice cut through the chaos. And they listened. In the NICU, tiny ventilators were being hand-pumped by trembling hands. Ava moved from crib to crib, counting seconds, checking rhythms. You're doing great, she told a young nurse fighting tears. Don't stop. But even as she worked, Ava's mind raced. This wasn't about casualties. If they wanted deaths, they'd used poison, or fire, or explosives. This was about exposure. About forcing her to show up. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Enjoying the dark, a familiar voice asked. Victor Hale's associate. The one who'd vanished. This ends tonight, Ava said. The voice chuckled. No, tonight it begins. The call dropped. Ava's blood ran cold. Then she noticed it. Not what was failing, but what wasn't. One wing still had power. The old surgical wing, decommissioned, sealed, forgotten. Her chest tightened. They want me somewhere specific, she whispered. Ava moved alone. The flashlight beam bounced off peeling paint and closed doors as she pushed deeper into the abandoned wing. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. Then she smelled it. Not lethal, but flammable. Gas. She froze. The lights snapped on. A man stood at the far end of the corridor, hands raised in mock surrender, smiling calmly. You came, he said. Where's the trigger? Ava asked flatly. He laughed, always straight to the point. She scanned the room, valves, pipes. A single spark would turn this place into a bomb. This isn't about killing patients, Ava said. It's about me. The man nodded. Hospitals were the test, you're the lesson. He stepped closer. You taught people to trust their instincts, to break rules. Yes, Ava said, and it saved lives. And now, he replied softly, they'll watch you break them and wonder if they were wrong. He lifted a remote. The alarms screamed back to life. Across the hospital, emergency lights flickered on. Generators roared. But Ava didn't move. She understood now. The blackout was bait. The real threat was trust. If she attacked him, if she was seen breaking protocol again, everything she built would be questioned. You won't do it, he said confidently. Too many cameras, too many eyes. Ava looked at him. Then slowly, she smiled. You misunderstand, she said quietly. I'm not alone anymore. Footsteps thundered behind him. Security, police, staff. People Ava had trained. People who trusted their instincts. The man turned too late. He was tackled, the remote skidding across the floor. Ava exhaled. By dawn, the hospital was stabilized. No lives lost. No explosions. The suspect was in custody, his plan unraveled by the very system he'd tried to discredit. As the sun rose, Ava sat on the hospital steps, exhaustion crashing over her. Thomas Walker approached, coffee in hand. They tried to break you, he said. Ava nodded. They almost did. But they didn't. She looked back at the building. They thought this was about hospitals, she said softly, but it was always about people choosing courage. Thomas smiled. 8 seconds. Ava smiled back. Sometimes, she said, 8 seconds is all it takes. The man in custody didn't talk. Not during booking. Not during interrogation. Not even when federal charges were read aloud. He just smiled. That smile stayed with Ava Collins long after she left the Ohio hospital. It followed her onto the plane back to Washington. It lingered in the quiet of her apartment when sleep refused to come. Because smiles like that meant one thing. He hadn't been the end. 2 days later, the confirmation arrived. A classified briefing. Restricted clearance. 3-letter agencies in the room. Ava sat at the table, hands folded, as a map lit up the screen behind the analyst. Based on digital forensics and financial trails, the analyst said, We've identified a decentralized network. No single leader, cells operating independently. How many? Ava asked. The analyst hesitated. At least 12 active cells, possibly more. The room went silent. These people aren't targeting hospitals anymore, another official added. They're targeting you. Ava leaned back slowly. So the blackout wasn't escalation, she said. It was rehearsal. Heads nodded. They wanted to see how you'd respond under pressure, the analyst said. You passed. Ava didn't feel like celebrating. That night, Thomas Walker joined her on the balcony of her apartment. The city glowed below them, unaware of how fragile everything really was. They're recommending protective custody, he said quietly. Full detail, limited movement. Ava stared out into the dark. If I disappear, she said, they win. Thomas didn't argue. He knew her too well. There's another option, he said after a moment. She turned. What? You step down, publicly, quietly. The words landed hard. You become a symbol of success, he continued. Protocols in place, systems running, you walk away before they can make you the battlefield. Ava closed her eyes. She thought of the hallway. The poison. The punch. Everything had started because she'd been there. Visible. I didn't build this to protect myself, she said. I built it so others wouldn't have to stand alone. Thomas nodded. I know. The message came the next morning. Encrypted. Jord. Final move, tonight, you or them. Attached was a location. A conference center in Virginia. Hosting a healthcare leadership summit. Thousands of people. Ava felt the familiar calm settle over her. Fear burned off, leaving clarity behind. They're forcing a choice, she said to herself, so I'll give them one. The summit was already underway when Ava arrived. Metal detectors, security teams, plainclothes agents everywhere. But Ava knew better. Security didn't stop ideology. She moved through the crowd slowly, senses open, reading the room the way she'd been trained to years ago. Then she felt it. Not chemical, not mechanical, human. A ripple of tension moving against the flow. A man near the rear exit, calm, still, too still. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered. He smiled. Ava didn't hesitate. She raised her hand. The room froze as security responded instantly, converging on the man before he could move. He didn't resist. As they led him away, he leaned close enough to whisper. You proved our point, he said softly. You had to be here. Ava met his gaze. No, she replied. I proved yours is unnecessary. The summit ended safely. No attack. No casualties. But the message was clear. They would never stop trying. Not as long as Ava remained the face of the system. That night, Ava stood alone in front of the press. Cameras, microphones, millions watching. She took a breath. Tonight was not a failure, she began. It was proof. Proof that vigilance worked. Proof that people trained to act could stop threats without waiting. But this system was never meant to depend on one person, she continued, and it never will. She paused. As of tonight, I'm stepping down as director. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I'm not leaving, Ava said firmly. I'm stepping back so the mission can move forward without becoming a target. She smiled softly. This was always bigger than me. Thomas watched from the crowd, emotion tight in his chest. She'd chosen sacrifice over safety. Again. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, Ava packed a small bag. No escorts. No spotlight. Just space. Before she left, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You disappeared. Ava typed back calmly. So did your excuse. She powered the phone off. Across the country, hospitals continued to function, alerts observable, staff confident, lives protected. No single face. No single target. The system endured. And Ava Collins walked into anonymity, not as a retreat, but as her final act of defense. 3 years passed. No headlines carried Ava Collins' name anymore. That was exactly the point. Across the United States, hospitals ran quietly safer. No fanfare, no speeches, no single figure at the center. The Collins Protocol had evolved, renamed, restructured, decentralized. New leaders rotated in and out. Systems updated themselves. Training refreshed every 6 months. There was no face to target anymore. Only habits. And habits saved lives. In a small coastal town in Oregon, Ava lived in a rented house overlooking the water. She worked under a different last name, teaching situational awareness to EMTs, teachers, ferry crews, anyone whose job required noticing small things before they became disasters. She didn't carry a badge now, just experience. Most people never knew who she really was, and she liked it that way. One autumn evening, Ava sat on the porch watching the sun sink into the ocean when her phone rang. A number she hadn't seen in years. Thomas Walker. She answered quietly, "Hey." "They caught the last cell," Thomas said. "No arrests, no drama, just done." Ava closed her eyes. "Finished." "Good," she said. There was a pause. "You changed the country," Thomas added. "You know that, right?" Ava smiled faintly. "I changed 8 seconds." Thomas laughed softly. "Grace starts kindergarten tomorrow." Ava pictured the little girl she'd once watched sleeping in a bassinet, alive because of a choice made in a hallway. "Tell her I said good luck," Ava said. "She already knows your name," Thomas replied. Ava's smile faded. "I hoped she wouldn't." "She knows it," he said gently, "but she doesn't need it." Across the country, in a busy hospital in Arizona, a young nurse froze mid-step. Something felt wrong. Not obvious. Not loud. Just off. A man stood near the elevators, wearing scrubs that didn't quite fit. His badge hung too low. His eyes moved too quickly. The nurse remembered her training. She didn't panic. She didn't accuse. She pressed the alert button. Security arrived within seconds. The man was carrying a syringe filled with a lethal compound. Later, when asked why she'd acted, the nurse shrugged. "It was just a feeling," she said. "We're taught to trust that now." In a hospital in New York, a janitor noticed a door propped open where it shouldn't be. In Texas, a receptionist questioned a delivery that felt rushed. In Florida, a medical student spoke up instead of staying silent. None of them made the news. And that was the real victory. One evening, Ava attended a small community talk under her assumed name. A woman approached her afterward, nervous and unsure. "My brother died years ago," the woman said. "Hospital poisoning, no one noticed in time." Ava listened silently. "I just wanted to say, things feel different now," the woman continued. "People pay attention." Ava nodded. "They do." As the woman walked away, Ava felt the weight she'd carried for years finally lighten. This was the ending she'd hoped for. Not applause. Impact. Later that night, Ava walked along the beach alone. Waves crashed steadily, indifferent to human fear and human courage alike. She thought about the hallway again. The moment frozen in time. 8 seconds. 8 seconds to decide whether to act or look away. 8 seconds to choose courage over comfort. 8 seconds that echoed outward, touching people she would never meet. She realized something then. The story had never been about a punch. It had been about permission. Permission to trust instincts. Permission to interrupt danger. Permission to believe that ordinary people could change outcomes. Ava breathed in the salt air and let it go. Somewhere in a federal archive, her name existed only in redacted files. Somewhere else, it existed only in memory. And everywhere else, it existed as behavior. People noticing. People acting. People choosing not to hesitate. That was enough. Ava turned back toward the house, the porch light glowing warmly in the dark. Tomorrow she'd teach another group. Another room full of people who didn't yet know how powerful they could be. She smiled to herself. 8 seconds. Sometimes that was all the world needed. If this story moved you even a little, remember this. Awareness saves lives, courage spreads, and hesitation can be deadly. Like this video to support real-life heroes who act when it matters. Subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that remind us how one decision can change everything. Comment below, would you have acted in those 8 seconds? Because the next story might depend on someone like you.